Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Bruce Patterson. Today I'm set up here in front of this canola field and I want to take one photo. And while I'm taking that photo, I'm going to run through all my camera settings, why they're set the way they are, and how I'm taking this picture. There's three things that make a good image, and this I'm taking from a photographer I love to follow. His name's Adam Gibbs. I'll put a link up to his channel here and also in the description below. But he says there's three things to a great image. One is light, secondly is composition, and third is subject matter. Subject matter, that could be anything really. But getting back to when you come up to a scene, you see this and you have all those three things, they're all ticked off. You have a beautiful scene in front of you. How do you capture that scene? Well, all of us, when we look at a scene like this, we have a vision in our mind right away of what we want to get. And so what you want to do is be able to come in and use your camera to capture what you're seeing in your mind. You got to remember, your camera is just a tool. It's an instrument to use to capture this scene. How you use it is going to depend on the quality of your photo. So number one, you have to get off of auto. You got to go on the manual. There's no way about it. Also, if you're shooting in JPEG, you have to switch over to RAW. The RAW files contain so much more information on them. It's just a shame to not shoot in RAW, especially when you have the capability. If you're just going to do JPEG and auto, then you might as well just use your iPhone. You've invested a lot in your camera, so use all that it has to offer. Okay, so first thing, shoot RAW. Switch over to RAW. I know a lot of people who shoot JPEG because they don't understand Lightroom. They find it too difficult. Lightroom can be fairly easy. Just when you load into it, go to the developer module. Right below exposure, there's a little button there on the right hand side that says auto. Click that and it'll do all your settings for you. You can adjust each slider individually to make it how you want. And then the only other thing you have to do is go down and lens correction. But if you are more interested in that, I have a previous video that I did. I'll put the link up here for. And it walks you through Lightroom a bit better. But you don't have to get full blown into Lightroom off the beginning to get a good picture. That brings us for the second thing. You have to shoot in manual. Now when you come to set up your camera, the first thing you're going to need is white balance. So when I first started into photography, I used to carry a grade card. I would preset my white balance. I would put the grade card in the scene and then click on it when I was in Lightroom to adjust the white balance. But after a while, I noticed that I was always adjusting my white balance in Lightroom anyway, no matter what it was. And a lot of times it would cause me problems because I would forget to change my white balance when I took one shot from one scene to the other. And the lighting had changed enough. So what I do now is I shoot on auto. And I find auto is, on these newer cameras, is pretty good. It frees me up from white balance. And like I said before, I always find when I go into Lightroom, I always make it slightly warmer or cooler than what I shot it at. And sometimes with the auto, I've left it there. So by all means, if you're not sure about white balance, shoot in auto. If you do want to use the grade card in that, by all means, feel free, go ahead. But white balance, or auto white balance, does a good job. So when we're shooting in manual, we use the exposure triangle. And the exposure triangle basically consists of ISO, aperture, and shutter speed. Now when these three things are all equal, you have a great exposure. So what you try to do is you try to set your camera so that you have all three of these sides on the triangle right. So how do we do that? Well, number one, you start with ISO. Your camera has a base ISO. You'll be in your manual, tell you what it is. This camera here, it's a Nikon D750. The base ISO is 100. My old D90 was 200. A lot of newer cameras, the Sonys and that, and even the Nikon, the base ISO is 50. So you should always start out in your base ISO. The lower the ISO, the better. So, but you know, the base ISO is usually the best for that camera. So set it up, in this case would be 100 ISO. Then from there, you look at your scene. What do I want to show here? What do I see in my brain? Do I see it sharp from front to back? Do I see it blurry in the background? Or in the front, you might have the front blurred, the back. So the next thing we got to do to get our vision is to set our f-stop, our aperture. The higher the aperture, the more depth of field I'm going to have. So like in landscape photography, we usually try to get sharpness from front to back. So we're usually looking at from f8 to f11 to get total control over our depth of field. In some cases, depending on what you want, you may go up to 1622. For example, if you have the sun in the shot and you're trying to get a starburst or a sunburst, you basically set it up to f18, f22, and then that'll give you this nice little starburst where you have all the fingers coming out of the sun. Also, it helps that if, say, like you have a tree, if you have the sun half covered by the tree, you'll get a beautiful sunburst out of that. So, you know, you have to think of what your picture is going to look like at the end and decide. But if you just want a standard depth of field, you do f8 to f11. It will pretty much give you there on most of the lenses nowadays. So there's your f-stop taken care of. The only other thing is your shutter speed. So that, again, you can set it automatically, and it'll depend on what you want. Do you want to slow it down enough to get the clouds streaking? Do you just want to freeze the action? So you have to consider this as well. So anyway, we're going to go through the back of my camera now, and I'm going to set up and explain these things again as I go to shoot this scene here. And looks like the light's gone a bit, but we'll try it anyway. Here's the back of the camera. As you can see, right now it's pretty dark. I have my histogram here. On the side here, I have my shutter speed. And that's every camera. When you look through the viewfinder, you'll see this run along the bottom. You'll also see it along the top here. And as I change my shutter speed, it'll change my histogram, and it'll either allow less light into the camera or more light into the camera. So basically, when you start out, you want to be right on 0. Have everything lined up there. That gives it basically what I want. So right now we're going to, excuse me, move up the, we'll go up to f11. So there we are. So basically I've decided I want to shoot at f11, ISO 100. And then we're just going to focus that. And now you notice my histogram's off again. So I can change that by adjusting the shutter speed here. And what I want to do is move the histogram over so I'm not clipping any of the highlights and I'm not clipping any of the shadows. Gives me a nice exposure, and it looks pretty good there. You notice I'm a bit off, but it's still okay. So now the thing comes into, if you don't have this histogram on here, how do you get that perfect picture? The newer cameras and the more expensive, higher models will have a histogram on the back. Some of the entry model cameras won't. So now if I was back here and just had it at 0, what I could do is I could take a picture and then come in, there's my histogram. So here's my picture. As you can see, I had 1/500th of a second, f11, ISO 100. It's way too dark. So I want to change that now. And so what I'll basically do is I'll come in. I'll tell you what, I'm going to just go out of live view. So I want to reduce it. So what I'll do now is I'll come down, and every click of the thumb wheel takes me down 1/3. So that's one stop. I had 1/500th of a second. When I reduce my shutter speed in half, I basically move it one stop. So from 500 to 1/250th, I've decreased my shutter speed by one stop. So now I'll take another picture. I can come up and I can see my histograms come over. I'm not clipping on the side there. I could even try going a bit more. Okay, so we come in, we were at 1/250th of a second. So let's just decrease it about a stop. We'll take a shot there. And you can see we're at 1/200th f11. We still haven't clipped. Okay, so there's our settings. We're 1/200th f11. So we're going to just take it down to another one click. It's another third, and we'll take another picture. And there we are, and we still haven't clipped. So we're and we're looking pretty good. Nothing's clipped on our RGB, and we've got a few highlights just blowing out there, which is not really a problem. So there basically we have it. So that's would be how you get your shutter speed while you set up and you don't have the histogram on live view. So now we come back up here into live view, and yeah, so yeah, about 1/200th of a second. I like it because we did have a bit of clipping there the other route. So that's how you get your shutter speed. It's not really science or anything else. So okay, we discovered shooting raw, your white balance, your manual settings. What do you want for your depth of field? What do you want for your shutter speed? Right now I got 1/200th of a second, which is what I want because I have a slight breeze and these yellow flowers are waving back and forth. So I want to freeze them. If I wanted to get movement in the clouds, I would even lower it, and then I would have to adjust my ISO or my aperture in order to get my triangle again and get a perfect histogram. So always, and I can't stress this enough, always look at your histogram, because your histogram is going to tell you exactly what's in your picture and how well it's exposed. So always do that. Now the last thing to shooting in manual is your focus. Your focus point. So where do you want to focus? And number one tip here is, by all means, go to single point focus. You don't want to let the camera decide what you're trying, what your main subject is. Like in this case here, it might say, oh, I like this tree on the left or the one on the right, and it'll focus on that and not the crop. I remember I learned this situation the hard way. It was in Australia at the Sydney Zoo. Saw a koala bear, and he was in a tree, and I lined up, had a beautiful shot of him, and the camera decided that the subject I was taking a picture of was the tree and not the koala bear. The koala bear came out soft, which really disappointed me. After that, I went and switched to single point focus. It's very easy to do. Look it up in your manual, and then you decide what your focus point is, and usually it's your subject, but you'll want to decide what part of the picture you want to focus in. If you have an object like a tree or some deal you want focused on, that's your main subject, then focus on that tree and the rest will fall into place. Okay, now how do we do it for a landscape? I want everything in pretty much sharp or in focus from front to back. So now there's two ways of doing this. One is you come down to, let's see, do we have a grid here? Okay, now we have our rule of thirds here. So if you come down and you focus 1/3 of the way into your scene, right on your 1/3 line, You can focus there, and that's pretty much going to give you everything you need in focus. All right, so that's one of the easiest ways to do it. You can get tables out and do, what do they call it, hyperthermal evaluations or distance. It's a lot of math. You can get apps for it and everything else. I find this way is really simple, easy to use. There is one other way you can do it too, and that's, I'll just give you a quick look over here. Okay, the second way to set your depth or your focus point is to go to your back of your camera, look at the bottom of your camera, see what the closest thing is or what's on the bottom of your picture frame there. And in my case, it's the bottom of this tree here. So now I'll look at that, and I'm basically from the front of the lens to that tree, I'm looking at about 6 feet. So what I want to do now is I want to double that distance to 12 feet. So right over here would be one of these flowers. I can sit there and focus on that, and then that would give me everything in front, halfway in front. So if I'm at 12 feet, everything from 6 feet on will be sharp focus. I'll use this technique when I really want my foreground interest to be sharp. And in this case, the trees and the flowers, I want to be sharp. When I get further back, I'm not really that interested. You know, my sharpness is going to fall off a bit, but it's not going to bother me. So I'll focus over here, 12 feet. If I can't find something like, say, it's just straight yellow field, and I can't find one spot that's 12 feet, I'll move my camera back 6 feet, and I'll focus on the bottom of the tree. And then basically that's it. So that's how I would set up my focus point. Okay, so anyway, I can't really see in here, it's too dark, so I'm just going to lighten up the scene. And my focus point was pretty much on my 1/3 line, so there's basically 12 feet away from my camera face. The lens of my camera to there is approximately 12 feet. You don't have to be precise. Don't carry a tape measure around with you. Anyway, so we focus on that. And now the thing is, if you're using the shutter release up here, switch your camera into the manual mode so you don't change focus. As you can see, I use back button focus, so it's no problem. So what will happen is if you're using the shutter release up here, when you push it, as soon as you're halfway down, you'll refocus. So either switch your camera to auto or manual, and then also keep that one focus spot right there. And then when you push it, if it does refocus, you'll be on there, but you're better off just to switch it to manual. So, okay, so now let's get our exposure right again. And I want to bring up my histogram. And that should be, no, yeah, that looks like, yeah, I like that there. Actually, the light has changed just a little bit, so I'm going to try this one here at 1/60th of a second. We'll take our shot, and I have it set up on a 2-second timer, or use a remote shutter release. You don't want to introduce any camera shake. And we'll just take a picture. Okay, it's a bit dark, but I can lighten all that up in Photoshop, no problems. I haven't clipped on the blacks. I'm right there on the highlights. RGB looks good. Now, if one of these are out, I would have to change my settings a bit, but right now they're all looking good. Highlights, I just have a little bit of blowing out, so I could increase my shutter speed just a little bit to get that. And that's it. So, yeah, we'll try 1/200th of a second on this one. And just go down to my highlights there. All I've done was move it 1/3 of a stop, and I don't have any blinkies on this one. Actually, I really like the blinkies. They show you exactly where you had a lot left off and what kind of exposure you have. All right. Okay, so basically I hope that helps you. I know I sort of rushed through it and just glossed over a lot of it, but you know, start using the manual. The more you use it, the better you get at it. You won't even think while you're doing the settings and that. So like I said, I hope that you found this useful. If you liked it, please give me a thumbs up, and if you haven't already done so, please subscribe. And until next time, we'll see you. And if you have any comments about this or any questions, please comment below and let me know. Okay, thank you very much. You guys have a great day. Bye.